the majority of people, they're still seeing the world through a lens that was built for them. And they want more, they just don't know how to do it. So what I teach, which is what CIA teaches, is how to see the world in the way it really is. Here's what I'm going to tell you.
Andrew Bustamante is back, a former CIA officer and founder of Everyday Spy.
A company on a mission to help you get anything you want in life with the skills the CIA taught him.
We don't know the recipe for success. Our society doesn't teach us the plan, the framework, the process. That's what CIA did for us. They just taught us a simple system. And one gentleman, one of the frameworks that we taught him helped him get a $32,000 raise. We had one person say, I followed your framework. I won over the interviewer. Now I have this job that I would have never gotten otherwise. But I'm not surprised when they happen because, of course, the recipes work because they were refined in the center of CIA. So first, we have an exercise called Get Quiet. And in a Get Quiet exercise, all you do is just, the reason that we do that is because we have the informational advantage going into any situation.
Interesting.
Then there's the 4 C's of building influence rapidly. So if you want to build influence, the first thing we have to do is, and now you actually take the action to get what you want.
So what about persuasion then? How do I persuade somebody?
Persuasion is a process that's much easier. It really is as simple as, finally, the secret sauce at CIA that we know that most people don't understand is that now you can do whatever you need to improve yourself and your life.
The Diary of a CEO raffle is others to all of you. So hit the subscribe button, get in before 7 million, and I'll announce the prizes and the winners in the comments below when we hit 7 million subscribers. Andrew, what is it you're doing in this season of your life?
You know, it's an interesting question. I actually just lost my grandmother recently in the last week or so. And my grandmother was one of the 2 women that raised me. I didn't have a father. I mentioned that to you the last time I was here. It was a moment that struck me because mortality became very real. It makes everything clearer. It makes you realize what actually matters and what doesn't matter. It shows you that the days that we have aren't actually guaranteed to us, even though we take them for granted every day. I don't know if my flight home is gonna actually happen. I don't know if I'm gonna step out of the studio and get hit by a car. I don't know if my child is gonna get hit by a car playing in the driveway tomorrow. Because life is so fragile, and we don't think about it until we watch its fragility dissolve in front of us. We hear about tragedy, but tragedy is always happening somewhere else. It's so real, and yet we don't realize it every day.
It's a good thing we don't.
That's the truth. That's how it feels right now for me as well. I kind of wish I could go back to being ignorant again. It's that Matrix red pill, blue pill moment where I kind of wish I could go back in and forget that reality and forget that mortality is
In any way.
It does. Like, the biggest way that it's affecting me right now is really with business. Because, you know, we had a conversation not too long ago where I was very focused on trying to triple business this year because we had been tripling the year before and we had tripled the year before that, and it became this arbitrary number, this scorecard where I wanted to continue having this achievement. And then what I found is that scaling a business is no easy thing, and the struggles that come from scaling were consuming the majority of my focus all the time until this moment happened with my grandmother. And then all of a sudden I realized I have a team of people who can scale the business. I don't have to scale it. I just have to empower the team to do what the team does. And my job is very different. My job is to enable, empower, encourage, direct, lead, manage their efforts. But it's their job to grow. I can take some of that time and put it into the people that matter to me, the people that surround me, the people who have made me who I am, people like the woman on the couch that I was visiting in her death.
The business you're referring to is called Everyday Spy, right?
Yes, sir.
What is Everyday Spy? What is the mission of the business?
The mission of Everyday Spy is to use spy education to break barriers for everyone willing to learn.
And what is spy education?
Spy education is anything from specific spy skills, cognitive skills, physical skills. It can be breaking myths about what spies are and what spies are not, but bursting conspiracy theories, teaching spy processes and frameworks to everyone from entrepreneurs to business owners and CEOs so that they can use those same frameworks to improve their leadership, to improve improve their sales, to improve their revenue or their organization.
Do you ever have a bit of you're a guy that thinks quite big picture about things, and sometimes thinks a level above everybody else. Do you think the people you teach these things to know what they're looking for in life? Do you think they actually know what they're aiming at?
No, I don't. And I'll tell you why. Because I don't think that the majority of people who learn from Everyday Spy see the world in the way it really is. I think they're still seeing the world through a lens that was built for them. Have you ever looked through a window in an old cabin or in an old house? It's kind of hazy. It's maybe it's stained or it's dirty or the dirt is so thick on it that it doesn't wash off. Have you ever seen a window like that?
Yeah. My old shed at home when I was a kid growing up.
So you're inside the shed and you're looking out onto a sunny day and you know it's a sunny, beautiful forest on the other side of the window. You know it is, but that's not what you see through the window. I feel like that's how many of our high-achieving brothers and sisters feel. They know it's a sunny forest on the other side, but school and university and working for somebody else and growing their business has created this hazy glass. And you can't trust what you see through the glass. You know that what the glass is showing you isn't real, but you also can't prove it because you can't step outside the glass. You're inside the shed. So a lot of what I try to do with Everyday Spy is just shatter the glass, because you don't need the glass to be between you and the real world. And that's what it felt like for me when CIA trained me how to be a field officer. I don't feel like they took me out of the shed. I don't feel like they cleaned the glass. I feel like what they did is they just shattered the glass. And there I was looking at the world for what it really was, and it all made sense until I started meeting other people who were still looking through the glass, and there's no way to teach them otherwise, or there's no way to convince them otherwise. The only thing you can do is teach them to break through the barrier themselves.
So that I can understand that, can you tell me what your perspective of the world was before and after the shattered glass?
When I was growing up, all through high school, I went to the Air Force Academy, which is a military school that you have to get accepted on scholarship to go to. Even getting accepted to CIA itself. Every step of the way, I believed that achievement came from doing what you were told better than anybody else so that you could be empirically better than the competition. That's what I believed. But what I found along the way was oftentimes that was true, but oftentimes it wasn't. Sometimes people who had no business being next to me in a race, at the Air Force Academy, on the college teams, at the CIA. Sometimes the people to my left and to my right had no business being there. They just were the son of somebody influential. They were the daughter of somebody important. They had money, they had opportunity, they were a foreigner. Who knows? But it wasn't always merit-based. But everything had always taught me that it was merit-based. That the best jobs go to the people with the best scores and who go to the best universities. Like, that's what I was taught. But that wasn't really the truth. The richest people weren't the smartest people. The most successful people weren't the hardest workers. And that was when, as a kid even, I started feeling like there's a forest on the other side. But all I see is this picture that doesn't seem to make sense. So then when I got to CIA, and CIA put me through their field tradecraft course, FTC, which is often referred to as the farm, what they did at the field tradecraft course is they said, society is conditioned to believe a certain way because society needs to be a giant economic machine. We all live inside of a giant machine. We are conditioned through the education process, through the industrial process, through the church process, to fall into a hierarchy that we believe is meritorious, that is a meritocracy, so that hard work and obedience and loyalty gets rewarded. Because the only way that the government stays in power of a large group of people is if there's a predictable system.
As if they believe there's a system.
And since a system is really nothing more than a belief system, all you have to do to step outside of the system is stop believing, or believe in a different system. So what CIA teaches us to do is find the people who question the system enough that they're open to being taught a different system. And then we teach them the system of espionage or treachery.
So they chose you because you were a bit of a defiant personality or thinker?
I would say,
or uncustodial, or potential of being?
I would say it differently only because defiance as a term by itself means that you just reject everything. Instead, it was more of like a curiosity. I was still very loyal to my country, very loyal to the idea of some sort of authority figure. I was still an individual that had a history of childhood trauma that turned me into a person that needed external validation, but I also chose where that external validation came from. So it was kind of the right amount of trauma to be able to make me loyal to a specific organization. Whereas some people who are truly defiant aren't loyal to anyone, right? They defy everyone.
So the CIA told you that the world is,
Predictable.
but also the way that you explained it made it seem like it was a bit of a conspiracy.
Not a conspiracy, but absolutely a system. A conspiracy means that there's some sort of, a conspiracy insinuates that there's some sort of negative intention. There is no negative intention. In order for there to be a society at all, in order for there to be structure and lawfulness, there needs to be a system. And in order to create the system, we have to intentionally, continually repeat and program the system. What is a business? A business is nothing more than a series of predictable, reinforced processes and systems that yield a predictable outcome. Why do we think a government is anything different? Why would we think that society is anything different? If you really look at what the church does, if you really look at what Harley Davidson does, it's essentially the same thing. Find people who believe in an ideology, bring them in, give them a framework to believe in that ideology. The church is good and evil, heaven and hell. Harley Davidson is freedom and individuality. And then you just give them a system to think about it. One wears crosses, one wears eagles. One meets on Sundays, one meets on Tuesdays at the local road bar. One goes on, civic duty to collect trash. The other goes on multi-hour road trips. But in all cases, they market to the young, they market to the middle-aged, they market to the very old. Their senior members bring in junior members. They have clubs, they have everything, right? They're two separate
The Son of God had just arrived on Earth as a man, and the devil had to move quickly. After his cunning temptation was resisted by Jesus, Satan had no choice but to initiate his final attack against humanity's last hope. For the next 3 years, after entering Judas at the Last Supper, Satan triggered the final temptation of Jesus. For the next 15 hours, he would endure suffering on an unimaginable scale, a climactic effort to get the Son of Man to sin by Satan. If successful, humanity would be invalidated for good. After Jesus had breathed his last, Satan waited for the confirmation of his victory. He expected that if Jesus did maintain his sinlessness after the onslaught of suffering, he would rise again as he promised. But in the end, he only For centuries, the devil has been the laughingstock of Christians. We've boiled him down to a mindless, raging being, creating chaos just for the sake of chaos. But have we ever considered Satan as an actual character in the biblical story? A character with actual emotions, realistic motivations, and specific goals. A character who does nothing by accident and thinks through his every move. A character who had a real chance at changing the direction of human history forever. Have we ever asked the question, why did Satan really rebel from God? Why does he hate humanity so much? And what was his unique connection to Jesus? I mean, all the strongest villains in our favorite movies have goals and morals they believe to be right. So why would the ultimate villain be evil just for the sake of evil? And what does the Bible actually say about Satan? Throughout the whole Bible, we encounter glimpses of Satan's personality, fragments that hint at a more complex motivation. By putting all the pieces together, we get convincing answers to these tough questions. revealing a character with far more understandable objectives. The story I'm about to tell you deepens the entire biblical narrative, including all the major characters, and it starts in a time before humans. Many eons ago, God created a heavenly species. Glorious angelic beings who worship around the throne of their creator. But among the worshippers, God anointed one for a special purpose. Described as a signet of perfection and blameless in his ways, he was covered with many precious gemstones and was exalted to a special place in heaven. God himself chose this angel to be a guardian cherub, a morning star, shining bright in all his splendor in the full presence of God. His name was Lucifer, meaning bearer of light. Despite his high position, he believed he was deserving of more. He wanted to exalt himself above his angelic brethren and become like the Most High. Although ambitious, Lucifer served his creator blamelessly until God made a decision that would change everything. He decided to create again. The angels marveled at God's creation of light and of the stars. They sang praises as he created plant life and the land in which it would grow. They rejoiced as they watched him form the beasts of the field, the fish of the sea, and the birds of the sky. Everything he created was good. But on the sixth day, God made his most controversial decision, creating mankind. At this point, God says to himself a phrase that Lucifer never expected he would hear. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion. This creation was special, uniquely loved and appreciated by God, and yet they seemed so feeble and vulnerable. What exactly made this creation so special? Well, Lucifer was soon to find out, because God had a vision. A plan that would cause Lucifer to question everything. A plan to crown this pathetic little race of creatures with glory and honor. To bring them near to God. To establish them as God's own possession. To receive new, perfect bodies. To become heirs to his kingdom. To inherit eternal life, spiritual rewards, and dominion in heaven.
Halo bang,
And most critically,
saran grind
a
creep
plan
of racing
in
thought.
which they would
Kenapa
become
bang?
like the Most
Pakai
High.
ini, pakai resist kristal.
There was abundant rejoicing at the creation of the world in heaven. But Lucifer
Oke,
felt the
dua
growing
giant sama
resentment towards
satu
God's new love.
kidik giant.
Why would God create an entirely new species to worship when Lucifer and the angels had been doing it perfectly their entire lives? But to Lucifer's growing unease, there was even more to God's exaltation of humanity. He planned on giving the world to come, not to the angels, but to the humans. He planned to send the angels to the humans as servants. And ultimately, his new species would have authority to judge Lucifer and his brethren. God's ultimate creation wasn't the angels after all. It was these pathetic little animals. Lucifer was an angel brimming with confidence. He assumed that if God were to bless his creation, he would be the first. To him, angels were the supreme beings, and described as the morning star, he was the cream of the crop. He adored himself, and having humanity elevated above him was incredibly unfair. This is when Lucifer came up with a plan. A plan to prove to God and the angels that God was making a mistake. Adam and Eve lived in the Garden of Eden, and Lucifer identified weaknesses that could be exploited. The tree of knowledge of good and evil gave him an opportunity to strike. And with a simple question and a simple lie, Lucifer had successfully triggered the fall of humanity. He demonstrated to all the heavenly hosts and God himself just how easy it was to lead these creatures astray. This was the first step in Lucifer's vengeful vision. His objective was simple: to prove that the human race was incapable of fulfilling God's perfect design for them. To prove that humans weren't worthy of
resist
inheriting
kristal,
eternal
Bang.
life, or inheriting God's creation.
Sama full AP.
And ultimately, to get God to annihilate humanity and bless the angels instead. After the fall of man, God found wickedness in the heart of Lucifer, and he was cast out from heaven. He lost his status and his wisdom was corrupted, but he wasn't alone. Because God was so intent on exalting humanity, and Lucifer had just proven how easily they were deceived, many of his angelic brothers abandoned their heavenly posts as well and joined the rebellion. At that time, a third of the angels were convinced and deserted their creator. This is the moment when Lucifer, the guardian cherub, died. And Satan, the adversary of mankind, was born. With this new name came a new role. He would accuse mankind day and night, accusing them of sinning and failing to live up to the image of God. Satan knew that if humanity were to succumb to sin, God's justice would guarantee their destruction, proving that the blessing should have remained with the angels all along, and ultimately that Satan was right. But at the fall of mankind, God had an unexpected response. Once Adam and Eve ate of the forbidden fruit, they became sinners before God. They were ashamed of their nakedness and decided to run away and hide. But instead of destroying them for their betrayal, God sought them out. He created clothing to cover them and performed the first sacrifice. At humanity's lowest moment, God stood by their side. But Satan now had an effective argument to level against God. God's justice had been compromised in his gracious response to humanity's rebellion, and eventually, he would have to destroy them. The damage was done. Satan would embody his dual title as tempter and accuser, tempting the offspring of Eve to sin and accusing them of being failures when they did. This was his life's work, to ensure not a single human could live up to God's glorious design. And Satan's successful sabotage continued on and on throughout the generations. God saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. God regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. So he flooded the world, killing every single human. Satan had achieved the first part of his objective, but God's mercy got in the way. Yet again, God had shown undeserved mercy to humanity, and yet again, he relented from executing his justice by rightfully destroying them. Satan knew that if he kept up the efforts, someday soon God would have to annihilate humanity, until a certain man named Job offered a glimpse of hope for all of mankind. About 400 years after the global flood, all the angels came to present themselves before God, and Satan was among them. The angels listened in anticipation as God and Satan made a wager of cosmic significance. You see, before this conversation, Satan was roaming the earth, tempting the offspring of Eve to sin and accusing them of being failures. But there arose one man who Satan seemed to be ignoring. His name was Job, a man who was blameless and upright. Known as the greatest man of the East, Job would regularly sacrifice offerings just in case any of his children cursed God in their hearts. He was a man who truly sought to live a righteous life. A man who seemed to be upholding God's image better than many before him. But Satan disputed the heart behind Job's righteousness. He was convinced that Job's faith was in the blessings God had given him, rather than in God himself. He stated that if God were to remove the blessings from Job, he would surely curse him to his face. God, willing to test his faith, agreed, and from that moment, Job fell into the hands of the devil. All his material possessions were destroyed, and all of his family and servants, except for his wife, were killed in tragic circumstances. But instead of running from God or cursing him like his ancestors, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. But there was one more thing Satan had yet to do. One last trick up his sleeve. The angels gathered once more in God's presence, and God questioned Satan once more. He reminded Satan that his efforts against Job had proven fruitless. This wasn't good for Satan, because if this human could resist his allure, he would be forced to admit that God was right, and would be made a fool of before all of the heavenly hosts. So he snapped back at God and challenged his mercy again. "Strike his flesh and bones," he said. "Surely then he will curse you to your face." God once again agreed, but made it clear that Satan wasn't to take Job's life in the process. Job was covered from head to toe in blistering sores. His situation got worse and worse, but through it all, Job never cursed his Lord. For the first time in human record, one of Satan's accusations fell flat. His promise that Job would blaspheme God hadn't come to pass, and as a reward for his endurance, Job was exalted twice as high as he was when it all began. Through the faithfulness of Job, humanity had achieved their first minor victory, dealing Satan a small but shameful defeat. But things weren't all hopeful for mankind. Though he didn't curse God, Job still had to repent for some of his conduct. He fell short and was still undeserving of God's mercy. Before a holy God, he was still covered in filthy rags. It was clear to the heavenly hosts, and especially clear to Satan, that humans had a hard time living up to their image-bearing status. Mankind was still lost, fumbling around in the dark, piecing together their own idea of what it means to obey God and reflect his image. So God revealed something to man that would help restore their relationship, and something that the devil would quickly take advantage of. Around 640 years after Job, a man named Moses was given the law by God himself, a system in which people could atone for their sins by sacrificing an animal in their place. God had offered a temporary solution to the problem of man's evil that Satan had highlighted time and time again, but it was just that, temporary. Satan knew the offering of bulls and goats was incapable of truly satisfying God's wrath and cleansing the people of sin. He knew that the millions of animals that were slaughtered every year in God's name could never validate mankind as a race. He knew that God didn't even desire the sacrifices of animals. In light of this, Satan took advantage of the new law given by God to his people, and saw great success in tempting many to disobey him. Because the law illuminated the difference between good and evil, Satan knew exactly what God was pleased with and what he disapproved of. This made his job far easier, causing generations of kings to be led astray by foreign wives, unclean activities, and their own selfish pride. Once again, it seemed God's solution to mankind's problem had only served to strengthen the devil's arguments. As long as humans continued to sin, they were deserving of death. The Lord looked down from heaven on the children of man to see if there were any who understood, who sought after God, but they had all turned aside. Every one of them wandered the earth with filthy clothes. No one was righteous, not even one. More than 1,000 years after the law was instituted, a prophet named Zechariah saw something incredibly interesting. Despite playing a minor role among the prophets of old, Zechariah was one of the few humans who met one of history's most mysterious characters. A being who had appeared in glimpses to Zechariah's ancestors, a being who would play a critical role in the upcoming events, and a being who would spell disaster for Satan's accusations. A man named Joshua served as high priest at the time of Zechariah's vision. Due to their exclusive passage to God, The high priest had to follow stringent purity laws and was often considered the most holy among men. Yet Zechariah's vision opened with Joshua standing before his men and the being dressed in filthy rags. Satan appeared and started accusing Joshua before God and the being. This is the greatest among them? Even the holiest of humans is covered in filth and mud. What chance do they have in God's presence? Why don't you just destroy them already? God had heard enough. The being before Joshua rebuked the devil and silenced him. He then turned to Joshua and said to those nearby, "Take off his filthy clothes." Satan listened in utter disbelief as the being said the following words to Joshua, "I have taken away your sin, and I will put fine garments on you." But it can't be so. He's done nothing to deserve to be cleansed. If anything, he should be destroyed. But the being, ignoring Satan's accusations, said to them, "You are men symbolic of things to come. The Lord Almighty says, I will remove the sin of this land in a single day." Satan listened, baffled by the promise that was spoken. A promise that would erase all of his tireless work, all of his accusations, and all of his authority in a single day. But how is this even possible? And who is this being saying these things? The being that spoke to Joshua was known as the Angel of the Lord. For the next 500 years after Zechariah's vision, God seemed to take a back seat. From Satan's eyes, it seemed like God had run out of ideas to redeem humanity. He'd implemented animal sacrifice, he'd instituted a law to make man clean, he even purged a great number of them and started again. But none of these solutions could redeem mankind. According to God's justice, humanity should have been entirely exterminated eons ago. But according to God's mercy, humanity continued to live and multiply in their sinful state. Soon enough, God would have to decide. He couldn't claim both justice and mercy. He would have to choose one. While enjoying a period of victory, Satan couldn't help but feel anxious. The vision of Zechariah haunted him. The being promised to erase the sin of the whole land in a single day. Could it really be possible? God's word had been recorded by prophets and kings, and while studying the scriptures, Satan hunted for clues to help him prepare for God's redemptive plan. He refused to let anyone or anything erase all of his hard work in a single day. The thought of it terrified him. One night, a glimmering star appeared above a town called Bethlehem. A young mother named Mary gave birth to her firstborn child in a stable. God's plan started to take shape in Satan's mind. He wanted to redeem humanity by becoming a human himself. But it seemed too easy. It was as if God had given Satan the blueprint for his plan in the scriptures. He was playing with an open hand. Satan once again took initiative and moved promptly. He ordered the death of every boy under the age of 2 through King Herod, hoping to swiftly deal with this rising threat. But the boy escaped with his family to Egypt, and from Egypt, moved to Nazareth. Satan had been outsmarted by God. Not only did he fail to kill Jesus as a baby, he contributed to something much, much worse. In his pursuit of the child, he actually fulfilled an Old Testament prophecy, helping to confirm the boy's identity as Messiah. God's ultimate plan to redeem humanity had finally arrived, and Satan had already failed to stop it. The race against time had officially begun, but the devil, well versed in Old Testament scripture, still had some ideas he believed could bring God's plan to a catastrophic end. As time went on, the boy from Nazareth grew in strength and was filled with wisdom. Satan observed his greatest rival and worst enemy grow up before him like a tender shoot. There was nothing about him that made him stand out, no beauty or majesty. But to Satan, this humble carpenter was his ultimate fixation. While Satan prepared his next attack, God was already making his next move. Jesus was baptized by a prophet named John in the wilderness, before a great crowd of people. As he resurfaced from the flowing river, the Spirit came upon him from heaven, and God himself confirmed to all those listening that this was in fact his son. God had publicly announced his arrival as man on earth. He was finally here, and his public ministry was about to begin. Satan didn't know what the mission entailed, and he didn't know what God had in store, but he knew one thing. If God had any hope of redeeming humanity, this human form would be essential to the plan's success. So Satan set out to derail God's plan by using the strongest weapon in his arsenal, temptation. But Satan didn't catch God off guard with this move. This was actually something they agreed upon. Like the debate they had over Job, Satan and God met again to settle things once and for all. Finally, Satan had a chance to go up against God himself, in a form that he was confident he could tarnish. So God led Jesus into the wilderness by the Spirit, and there he met the accuser for a face-off that would change everything. Because the Father and Son were one, Satan's goal was simple: separate them. If he could trick Jesus into obeying him instead of God, he would be successful in separating the Father and Son, causing the Son to sin and ultimately invalidating humanity for good. He figured that if God in human form couldn't remain sinless, then the last hope for mankind would be snuffed out. But he needed something to wager, something that Jesus would actually consider doing. In his first temptation, Satan challenged Jesus to turn stones into bread, a simple but powerful test, considering Jesus had just gone 40 days without food. The devil targeted the lust of his flesh. Being fully man, Satan knew that Jesus was desperate to eat just like any other man in that condition. But in spite of his raging hunger, he answered the devil with scripture about God's providence. But Satan's next temptation was more cunning than the last. This time he took Jesus to the highest point of the temple and challenged him to jump, quoting a promise from God that the Messiah wouldn't suffer harm from a fall. Satan employed a tactic from the days of Eden, where he would deceive his target into believing God might not be so trustworthy. If Jesus were to jump, he would show that the relationship between them wasn't one of complete trust. But Jesus answered the devil with scripture of his own: "Do not put the Lord your God to the test." Satan had suffered 2 defeats so far, so for his final temptation, he had no choice but to wager everything at his disposal. He took Jesus to a high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. Kingdoms he had held captive in sin for thousands of years. A world under his control. A world which was his to offer. In exchange, the Son of God was asked to bow down and worship the devil in return. Jesus paused. He knew that someday all the kingdoms of the world would be his, that he would be made king over them all. He had no doubt in God's promise of that, but he reflected on what it would take to get there. If he listened to the devil and conceded, he could inherit the world without undergoing the torturous future to come. If he'd simply bow down to Satan, all of his suffering would be finished. But at the same rate, if God bowed down before Satan, he would be admitting that no human was deserving, that the blessing all those eons ago was misplaced, and ultimately that Satan was right. But Jesus, strengthened by the Spirit, rebuked the devil, exclaiming that there is only one name worthy of worship: God the Creator. With his powerful words, Jesus sent Satan away and was tended to by angels. Satan's attempt at the Son of Man had returned fruitless. Despite his terrible condition, Jesus remained faithful throughout the temptation and did not sin. Witnessing Jesus' faith, Satan writhed as he relived the agony of Job's victory all over again. But this time, the stakes were much, much higher. So he changed tact and waited for another opportunity. It seemed Satan's king had been dethroned, but his strongest piece, his secret weapon, was quietly sitting in the back, waiting for permission to make a move. For the next 3 years, Jesus went throughout the land undoing all of Satan's hard work. He healed those suffering in sickness. He raised people from the dead, and he expelled many of Satan's demonic kin from their hosts. At his sight, the demons quaked in fear and begged not to be destroyed by him. Every exorcism was a torturous reunion between a rebellious angel and his all-powerful creator. But Satan pondered, what was the point of all this? Why had the all-powerful God, creator of the earth, subjected himself within its confines? By clothing himself in human flesh, the limitless had limited himself. Shackled by hunger, bound by space and time, and subject to exhaustion, he seemed intent on living out the authentic human experience without taking any shortcuts. It wasn't until Satan overheard Jesus speaking to his disciples about his mission on earth that the picture became a little more clear. While the disciples ignorantly dismissed the outrageous plan Jesus shared, the devil adapted his plans accordingly. God was enacting a strategy, a way to fulfill the threat of Zechariah's vision and undermine all of Satan's accusations. But the secret to his plan wasn't in a single nation or a single people. It was in a single man and a single sacrifice. Despite humanity's pitiful weakness, God was proving that this man could achieve something that none before him came close to achieving: perfection. After living the perfect life, the man would be bound to the altar as the perfect lamb, a sinless sacrifice to end all sacrifices. Satan realized that if Jesus somehow managed to carry out this mission successfully, humanity would be permanently redeemed, freed from his accusations and worthy to receive the blessings God had denied Satan in the beginning. God's justice would finally be satisfied in the slaying of his son, allowing his mercy to abound freely upon those undeserving wretches. Satan had to move and fast, so he spoke with God one final time. Have you considered my son Jesus? There is no one on earth like him. He's blameless and upright. Have you not protected him all these years? From his birth, through his childhood, and even during his ministry. You've put a wall of safety around him. Remove your hand of protection, and let's see whether he can endure what is to come. Just like every human before him, he will ultimately let you down. Very well, God answered. The wager was on again, but with one major difference. This time, the fate of all humanity hung in the balance. God would show before all the powers and principalities that humans deserved his blessing. Or Satan would prove before all the heavenly hosts that he deserved this misplaced honor. The stakes were higher than ever. Both parties' objectives hinged on whether Jesus could do the impossible. The devil got an idea. If he could at any point get the Messiah to stumble into sin, his perfect sacrifice would be invalidated, and the final hope of redeeming humanity would be lost. If God in human form couldn't prove himself worthy of the blessing, then no other hope for these creatures remained, leaving Satan to experience a resurrection of status. At this point, Satan knew the cross was unavoidable, so instead of evading it, he embraced it as an opportunity to sabotage Jesus before God. Satan devised a scheme to make use of every human at his disposal. He had many pieces to move. God had only one. Satan had to find a way to make Jesus sin before he escaped to the grave, ensuring any hope of humanity died with him. Jesus had put up a firm resistance in the wilderness, so Satan knew what he was up against. He would have to attack from every angle, humiliate and torture him, strip him of all comfort to make it impossible for Jesus to remain perfect. While sharing his final meal with his beloved disciples, Satan entered into one of Jesus' companions to turn Jesus over to the chief priests. But before it even happened, Jesus announced this betrayal at the dinner table. He seemed prepared, but Satan would not be unnerved, because the torture had only just begun. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Christ was overwhelmed with emotion. Knowing he'd just been handed over to the devil, he begged God to find another way to redeem humanity. But deep down he knew he was the final piece, the King of Kings. The future of mankind would be determined in the next 15 hours, and it rested solely on Jesus' shoulders. And with a simple kiss, Satan triggered the final temptation of Jesus. For the next 15 hours, he would be subject to a level of suffering never before experienced by man. Unfathomable agony on the physical, emotional, and spiritual level. These events would be later known as the Passion of Christ. Christ was arrested and taken to an illegal trial. His disciples scattered out of fear, and his best friends denied him 3 times. After a corrupt ordeal involving false witnesses and many deceptions, Jesus was convicted and sentenced to crucifixion. He was flogged and whipped, mocked and scorned. They dressed him in a purple robe and twisted together a crown of thorns, forcing it into his head. They took turns punching him, spitting on him and tearing out his beard. He was tossed into the open, where his own people formed a crowd encircling him. The leaders of the people choosing to worship their enemy's king. They hated Rome, but they hated God more. Jesus looked upon the very people he was there to redeem with sadness as they spat, mocked, and ridiculed their only redemptive hope. He carried his own cross to the mount where he was hung. Nails were driven into his hands and feet, pinning him to the wood and forcing his lacerated back to drag up and down the plank as he tried to grasp his next breath. While Satan was doing his worst, the earth cried out in agony as its maker was being slain. The sky became dark and the ground shook, but Satan refused to relent. He was so close to death, and yet Jesus hadn't opened his mouth against the Lord. Satan panicked. He started insulting the Son of Man, echoing his challenge in the wilderness. He saved others. Let him save himself if he is God's Messiah, the chosen one. If you are the King of the Jews, save yourself. Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us. Satan was exposing humans in all their depraved wickedness before the God who had come to save them. And finally, Jesus opened his mouth. While bearing all the sin of mankind in his flesh, he gazed up to heaven, and seeing only darkness, he muttered, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Was that it? Was all the pain and suffering too much to bear? Did he finally turn away from God and curse him in his last moments? Did Jesus die in sin like the rest of mankind? Had Satan just won? After Jesus had breathed his last, Satan waited for the confirmation of his victory. He expected that if Jesus did maintain his sinlessness after the onslaught of suffering, he would rise again as he promised. Seconds turned to minutes, minutes turned to hours, hours turned to days. Every second that passed gave Satan more confidence that Christ wasn't coming back. All factors seemed to point to a victory for Satan. Scattered disciples, widespread chaos, and a wounded planet. But on the third day, Satan trembled. The stone barring the tomb had been rolled away, and the body of his nemesis had vanished. On the third day, the reality of Jesus' victory over death hit him all at once, confirmed by his resurrection. On the third day, the deceiver of the nations discovered that he was the one who'd been deceived. He'd been deployed by the Father to carry his Son through the tortures that would redeem humanity, ensuring every prophecy was fulfilled and all the conditions were met to grant humanity the glory they never deserved. A deep resentment bubbled within Satan, a hatred unknown to mortal men, a loathing that had been brewing for eons, ready to burst forth in unprecedented outrage. Jesus had burdened himself with the sins of every human, taking them onto his own sinless body and removing them via his death and resurrection. For the first time ever, humanity was worthy to receive the blessings promised to them, and, most importantly, humanity was permanently freed from Satan's powerful accusations. No longer did Satan have the platform to accuse man before God. As far as God was concerned, Satan had no evidence that a redeemed believer was deserving of judgment. But Satan, desperately looking for a loophole, quickly identified something to exploit. Under this new covenant of grace, whoever believed in the Son would have eternal life, but whoever didn't would still perish. Satan realized that though Christ offered the gift of grace to all sinners, not all sinners would accept that gift. And if a sinner chose to remain in their sin, they'd be spitting in the face of their all-loving Creator and choosing their own condemnation. This was an outcome Satan desperately desired. And with the rapid growth of Christianity taking over, Satan had to act quickly. So he started to prowl, scouring the earth for weakness and preying upon them. He abandoned the name Accuser, for that power had been vanquished, and adopted the new title of Devourer. Satan saw some success in deceiving and devouring many over the following centuries. But those who believed in Jesus seemed to have other plans. They started gathering together for times of worship and encouragement. They called it church, and they started calling themselves Christians. Satan identified this fellowship as a threat. Though the early church was powerful in denying his attempts to creep in, its resistance faltered as time progressed. Satan secured quite an influential foothold in many congregations, deceiving people and luring them back outside to the dark world of sin and death. But he found that there were always some who resisted him. It was as if they had been protected by God himself from Satan's attacks. These new saints seemed to be equipped with some special armor, granting them immunity to the devil's intrusions. The group was called the Elect, and Satan realized he was powerless against them. Their stalwart defense frustrated Satan to no end. Satan's dominion over people was now challenged by these pockets of resistance, granted immunity by the sacrifice of Jesus, a sacrifice that Satan partially enabled. He needed something bigger. It was obvious their strength came through Jesus' power, so Satan adapted his plans accordingly. But how could he possibly contend with the risen Saviour, in ascended form, backed by the Father and Spirit? It was 3 against 1. Coordinating mankind into a force against them was an important and insulting step, but that army alone wouldn't stand a chance against the Holy Trinity. Satan needed a trinity of his own. Satan continued working evil amongst humanity, priming them for the day of battle against their Lord and Saviour. When the time had come and the pieces had fallen into place, Satan stood on the seashore, anticipating the climax of his plan to arrive. A powerful beast burst through the calm waters. It boasted 7 heads with 10 intimidating horns. One of the heads had a fatal wound, which had been healed. The wound stood in mockery of the wounds left in Christ's body from the cross, and so the beast joined Satan in his army against God. Satan granted the beast authority over his kingdom on earth, hoping the beast would use his pervasive charisma and deceptive charm to lure even the elect away from Jesus. If the elect could be led astray, Satan could crush the pockets of resistance within his empire of darkness and effectively mobilize all of humanity against their creator. The beast was known as the man of lawlessness, son of destruction, and was given the title of Antichrist. The Antichrist, backed by Satan, saw great success in deceiving the human race. The great beast received worship from the enslaved, and so did Satan. The devil had typically lurked in the shadows before now, deceptively luring people into following him. Openly being worshipped on a global scale was an unfamiliar sensation he could certainly get used to. Satan's pride was drained by Christ, but it was recharged by the worship he received that should have been God's. But Satan's unholy trinity was not yet complete. He was still awaiting its final member. The earth burst open as a second beast emerged. This beast had 2 large horns and spoke like a dragon. Completing the trio, the third beast adopted a special role. The authority of the first beast was shared with the second, reinforced by the signs and wonders it performed. Like the prophet Elijah, it called fire from heaven in full view of humanity. The second beast directed all praise to the image of the Antichrist and marked every human captivated by him with the mark of the beast. The second beast was given the title False Prophet. Satan was in a winning position. As more of the elect were deceived into worshipping the beast, his army grew. His unholy trinity was complete, and were ready for a 3-on-3. The time had finally come to enact Satan's endgame strategy. The unholy trinity opened their mouths, and from each of them came a demonic spirit that looked like a frog. They went out to all people, performing signs and deceiving them into joining the devil's army. All the kings of earth were gathered together, led by the Trinity of Destruction. The place they met was called Armageddon, and there they prepared their forces for the arrival of Satan's ancient opponent. Suddenly, a blast of white light pierced through the heavens. From the clouds came a man on a white horse. He was accompanied by myriads of other riders, descending from heaven's gates and gathering in the sky. The great King of Kings had returned to earth. But before initiating battle, a single angel caught the attention of them all. He stood in the sun and called out to the birds of the sky, "Come, gather together for the great supper of God." This battle cry sounded across both army formations, igniting the onslaught. The beast, the kings of the earth, and their armies against the white army of heaven. But the battle was swift and decisive. The beast was captured along with the false prophet, and together they were tossed alive into the fiery lake of burning sulfur. As they fell, they watched as the armies of God annihilated every soldier in the devil's ranks. Behind them, an enormous swarm of bloodthirsty birds followed, gorging themselves on the dead men's flesh. Satan was in trouble. In the face of such a defeat, Satan had no choice but to attempt an escape. Instead, he was seized by an angel from heaven and tossed into the abyss. Sealed and locked away by a special key, the devil was left alone with his thoughts, festering over yet another humiliation at the hands of God. Finally, he was imprisoned, giving mankind a chance to breathe without his relentless hounding. For the next 1,000 years, King Jesus ruled the earth in harmony. Believers who were beheaded for the gospel were resurrected to rule with Christ in his victorious kingdom. While the earth experienced a renewal, Satan sat in silent darkness, contemplating his humiliating defeats. From the very start, God had unfairly overlooked Satan, rewarding humans with the glory he deserved all along. He threw everything he had at Christ in his human form, desperately trying to ruin him. But in the end, he only served to advance God's redemptive plan for humanity, the very last thing he desired. He thought in forming an unholy trinity to oppose the Godhead, he would taste victory at last, but the battle seemed to be over before it even started. In reconciling his many failures, Satan had to make a decision. Would he concede at last, in hope that his arch-nemesis would show him mercy? Or would he fight unto death for his unruly cause? Many emotions may have stirred within him in those 1,000 years, but one rose to the top. One conquered all and overpowered any skerrick of morality left in his being. With snarling and gnashing of teeth, Satan embodied rage in its purest form. After the 1,000 years had ended, the abyss was opened and Satan charged out of the depths in fury. He stormed the face of the earth, trying his most twisted and cunning tactics to deceive the people one final time. He travelled the four corners of the earth and saw powerful success in gathering the nations together. He gazed over his new army. They numbered like the sand on the seashore. His battle lines stretched across the whole earth, and his army surrounded the camp of God's people in the holy city. The elect were staring down an unwinnable matchup from worldly standards, but they didn't serve a worldly God. Suddenly, the heavens opened and fire poured out onto the armies of Satan. The flames devoured every soul outside of the city. The devil, consumed with rage, was restrained and tossed into the same fiery lake of burning sulfur as his comrades. After the smoke cleared, Satan caught a final glimpse of mankind, glorious in being, pure and white, welcomed into heaven by their loving Creator. God was right all along. Mankind was worthy to receive the blessing because of Christ's atoning work on the cross. This flawed creation was now made perfect, imaging God without blemish. They were a creation that could only be described as glorious, and screaming in the lake of fire. Satan couldn't be further from that glory. Guys, thank you so much for watching.
Since the dawn of time, a perpetual war called the Eternal Conflict has raged between the hosts of the high heavens and the legions of the burning hells. Amid this battle, a group of rebellious angels and demons sought refuge. And so, they created the mortal realm of Sanctuary, using a monolithic crystal known as the World Stone. Hidden from the eyes of the heavens and the hells, Sanctuary became an oasis of peace, but its serenity did not last. In time, evil crept into the world and began a relentless crusade to twist the souls of mankind to its dark will. Players were invited to take on the role of a lone hero and explore Tristram, a town under siege by Diablo, the Lord of Terror, and his hordes of foul demons. With the help of the wise Herodric scholar Deckard Cain and other memorable characters such as Wirt and Ogden, players ventured into the haunted tombs, catacombs, and caverns sprawling beneath the town, and faced nightmarish foes like the Butcher, the Skeleton King, and eventually the Lord of Terror himself.
Diablo and demons fought endlessly in a war known as the Eternal Conflict. Their goal was to hold sway over all creation in the name of chaos and order respectively. At the heart of their war was a powerful artifact known as the World Stone, a reality-altering relic that granted untold power to those who would wield it, yet neither side would hold it in their possession for long. The main stage of the Diablo series would be set in a world named Sanctuary, a world created by the conjoined forces of the high heavens and burning hells to escape from this eternal war. Led by the archangel Inarius and the daughter of hatred, Lilith, in a blasphemous unison, they stole and used the great monolithic crystalline world stone, fragmented from the god Anu, to create their sanctuary in hopes of obtaining peace from the never-ending war of their brethren. The stone would then rest at the heart of the world and remain a source of great power as it was hidden within the mountain region of Arieton Sanctuary. It's here we would see the rise of the first humans in the cosmology of Diablo. Created by the union of angel and demon, these Nephilim would become the predominant peoples of the planet and the center of events throughout the game's timeline. Fearing the growing power of these Nephilim, it was put before Inarius that they should be destroyed to prevent the forces of heaven and hell from finding sanctuary and laying waste to his new paradise, as they had done so many times before across the course of the eternal conflict. This decision would not sit well with Inarius, so he went into quiet contemplation to mull over this drastic choice. However, Lilith would not hear of proposed filicide, having need of the power of the Nephilim to fulfill her goal of overthrowing the high heavens and burning hells and being the sole victor of the eternal conflict. And so, in a fit of rage, Lilith took the form of a beast of fang and claw and began to slay every rogue angel and demon who lacked the good sense to return to their respective planes. This action angered Inarius, but as he truly had feelings for Lilith, he vowed he would never kill her, nor could he harm her, and instead chose to banish her to a bleak realm of nothingness called the Void. The power of the Nephilim still proved too great to ignore, so Inarius attuned the World Stone to lessen their power gradually over time, reducing them to powerless humans and robbing the Nephilim of their immortality. Those who rose up against Inarius during this time would suffer under his wrath and be slain. Inarius had gone into hiding not long after leaving the world without leadership or guidance. Mankind would not sit idly by, and as tribes formed, civilizations rose across the world, forming their own governments and organizations. And man would eventually seek to restore their own power, developing the various forms of magic we see throughout history. One such form of magic, the power of conjuring spirits, was developed by the Vegeri, the spirit clan of mages. One mage, Jerry Harash, would conjure a spirit in a particularly dark mood and attract the soul of a demon from the burning hells by accident. Realizing what he'd conjured too late, he banished the spirit back, but that demon would reveal to the prime evils the location and existence of Sanctuary. The prime evils would then set a foothold on Sanctuary, realizing humanity could be used as a viable weapon, and established their own Temple of the Triune. In response, Inarius, desperate, returned from hiding and founded the Cathedral of Light to counter the influences of the Triune on humanity, and thus began the battle for the soul of mankind, known as the Sin War. During this time, Lilith found a way back into the world from the void and began attempting to rebuild her army of Nephilim, weaving her influences on a farmer by the name of Uldyssian Uldiomed, while in the guise of a young human woman, along with his brother Mendeln and two of his friends, Achilleos and Serenthia. The crew would rally the people of southern Kyrgyzstan, forming an army of powered Nephilim known as the Edirim, and take on the Triune and the Cathedral of Light in tandem. It wouldn't take long before Lilith's manipulations were revealed and defeated as well, as she was banished for a second time to the Void by Inarius. Before Inarius himself was defeated in combat by the farmer Uldyssian. The damage was done, and Sanctuary was now in plain view of both the high heavens and burning hells as a new battleground. However, in a joint decision by the Angiras Council of the High Heavens and Mephisto of the Burning Hells, Sanctuary was decidedly left alone and not destroyed as so many other worlds had been before, and they instead opted to stay out of humanity's way, but also watch them from a distance, but at a price. Inarius was promptly gifted by the High Heavens to Mephisto as a peace offering, and for his transgressions, he was tormented in the realm of hatred for the next 3,000 years. And at the culmination of the battle, Uldyssian had sacrificed himself, lending his own essence to the whole of Sanctuary, sending both the armies of heaven and hell back to their respective planes, and the World Stone was then reattuned, limiting the power of the Nephilim. Now leaderless, after the fall of the Temple of Triune and Cathedral of Light, the Mage clans assumed control of the political landscape of Sanctuary. The most powerful, the Vegeri, would hold the greatest influence, but internal strife would cause the delicate balance of power to collapse. Two brothers, Bartok and Horizon of the Vegeri, would struggle for control. Not learning the lesson with summoning of demons, the two waged a bloody war against each other, arguing over how to utilize demons to their advantage, causing immense devastation across the world and losing faith in the mage clans by the people of Sanctuary. It's at this time the mage clans became reviled in the people's eyes, and religion would move in to take its place, and an ascetic priest by the name of Akarat would found the religion of the Zakarum, becoming the dominant political power across the land, setting up footholds across all the world, from Kurast, the center of power, to Westmarch in the far western lands of Kandurus. The failure of the prime evils during the Sin War would spark a civil war in the Burning Hells, ultimately ending in the exile of the prime evils, Mephisto, Baal and Diablo, to Sanctuary, thanks to the combined forces of the lesser evils, where they were hunted and imprisoned by a group of mages, a clandestine group known as the Herodrum, that was formed surreptitiously by the Archangel Tyrael as to not break the High Heavens' former pact to stay off Sanctuary. These Herodric hunts resulted in the primes being held in specially attuned worldstone shards, known as soul stones. One was safeguarded by the Zakarum and Kurast. One was sealed in the chest of the leader of the Herodrum, Talrasha, deep in the sands of Aranok. And the last was buried within a labyrinth built into the hills of Kandaras, which would later become known as Tristram. The influence of the primevals was too much for the stones to contain, however. Mephisto would begin to seep out his hatred throughout the Zakarim church, taking over the head of the order, Sankakur, after their former leader, Kalim, would not yield to evil's influence. His will just
Gender
being
sejati,
too great.
yeah.
Mephisto counted on the events leading to the current state of being and set in motion his plan to free his brothers and once again use Sanctuary as a staging point to grow the power of the burning hells. He would then send the great adherent Leoric and his Archbishop Lazarus to Kandaras to find his seat of power in Tristram and free his brother as their new king, with the ultimate goal of the now corrupted Lazarus unearthing the Crimson Soulstone, holding the youngest of the primevals, Diablo's soul. This brings us then to the events of Diablo 1. Tristram, with Leoric as their king, would flourish for a time, but quickly descend into destitution. Lazarus found Diablo's prison, and after failing to utilize Leoric as the demon's host, turned his youngest son, Ulbricht. The disappearance of Ulbricht would drive the king mad, slaughtering the citizens of Tristram out of suspicion, until his own knights would slay him, but not before. He muttered a curse that would bind them to him even in undeath, as the Skeleton King. Soon after, 3 heroes would come to Tristram's aid. Morena of the Sisterhood of the Sightless Eye, Jazrith of the Vigerai, and Aidan, the eldest son of Leoric, and they would liberate the town from the evil influence of Leoric and Lazarus. But Lazarus's work was complete, and Diablo had found its new host in the young Ulbricht. After a grueling fight with the beast on the outskirts of hell, Aidan, the warrior, realizing Diablo would once again escape, mistakenly took the Soulstone into his own body to seal the demon. But this act would not stop the plans of Mephisto, for the all-consuming influence of the primevals would snuff out the light and leave only darkness in its wake. After a time of recovery and celebration, Aidan, Morena, and Jazrith would leave from Tristram, but the burning hells would follow in their wake. Demons and undead ravaged the town of Tristram and spread throughout the land. In Diablo 2, 5 heroes, including Cassia the Amazon, Zul the Necromancer, and Ascendra the Sorceress, along with a yet unnamed barbarian and paladin, would arise to answer this new surge of evil. Aidan, now possessed by Diablo, had set out across the land, heading east towards Kurast, and, having corrupted Morena, now the dreaded Bloodraven, enlisted the aid of the lesser evils Andariel and her twin brother Juriel, who had been summoned to Sanctuary from the burning hells by a summoning that Morena was coerced into. These 2 lesser evils acted to slow the heroes from catching up with this new dark wanderer and his quest to free his imprisoned brother Baal, whose location was hidden by lost Herodric knowledge, which the party uncovers in Horizon's arcane sanctuary, now inhabited by a newly corrupted Jazrith, the summoner. The heroes would then locate the prison of the demon Baal with the aid of Tristram's town scholar and last of the Herodrum, Deckard Cain, rescued from the ruins of Tristram, but it's too late. Now freed, Baal and Diablo steal across the Twin Seas to Kurast and soon join together with their brother Mephisto, who opens a portal to the burning hells for Diablo and sends Baal to gather himself and rally his forces to launch an assault against Ariat and corrupt the coveted Worldstone, while Mephisto holds off the heroes in the depths of the Travancore Temple. Diablo is then pursued into hell by the heroes, and with the aid of the Archangel Tyrael, he is defeated, and his and Mephisto's soulstones were destroyed in the Great Hellforge, presumably ending the 2 evils for good. The heroes then follow after Baal, joined by a druid of Skosglen and an assassin of the Vizjaktar. The heroes confront Baal within the Worldstone Keep, who has laid waste to the barbarian homeland, But Baal has completed Mephisto's plan, corrupting the Great Stone with a shard of his own Soul Stone. Even with the destruction of Baal, it's too late to reverse the damage, and in a last-ditch effort, Tyrael destroys the World Stone, scattering its shards across Sanctuary. In Diablo Immortal, Diablo's minion Skarn begins collecting shards of the World Stone for the Burning Hells to resurrect the Lord of Terror. But with the aid of the Archangel Ylnira, these efforts fail, and the heroes stop the resurrection of Diablo. To hear more of this story, donate $24.99 to the channel. I'm joking. Moving on. 20 years pass between Diablo 2 and 3, with very little happening in between. But then Tyrael, who was thought dead, is resurrected after he was destroyed in the blast of the Worldstone's destruction, forsaking his angelic mantle, and is sent plummeting to Sanctuary, where he plays his part in the event of the End of Days prophecy. Deckard Cain and his adopted niece Leah, with the aid of another band of heroes, a barbarian, a wizard, a witch doctor, a monk and a demon hunter, all canonically yet unnamed, save for some lesser connections to the short stories that may be cemented lore-wise in D4, uncover a plot of another lesser evil, Belial, who has sent his minion Magda and her coven to obtain the fallen star for himself. After killing Cain, an enraged Leah unleashes a terrific torrent of power, revealing a hidden gift within. After the heroes save Tyrael from Magda and restore, in part, his angelic power, they set out across the lands to stop Belial and the final lesser evil, Asmodad, who has mounted an assault from the crater of Ariat, all while learning more about Leah's growing power. They find and rescue the witch Adria, who is revealed to be Leah's mother and mentors in her growth. They also resurrect the slain Herodric mage Zoltan Kuhl, who constructed another soul stone capable of holding the souls of all 7 great evils. He also reveals to the heroes of their long dormant power and sets them on the path to awakening it. With the Black Soul Stone, the heroes capture the essence of Belial and Asmodad. Yet, strangely, the essences of the other 5 slain evils reside within already. Strangely, that is, until Adria reveals that she altered the stone and bound the evil's essence to it, drawing them in during a time of their demise. But the Soul Stone was complete without a host. However, one perfect candidate exists. Leah, the daughter of Adria and Prince Aiden, after he imprisoned Diablo within himself, joins with the Soul Stone, and now in possession of all 7 evils, becomes the prime evil, the living incarnation of Tathamet, the great 7-headed dragon that became the Burning Hells. Now powerful enough to mount an assault against the high heavens, Diablo routs the forces of heaven and nearly succeeds in destroying the Crystal Arch, before an awakened Nephilim, the heroes of Diablo 3, traveled with Leah, stops Diablo at the pinnacle of heaven. For a time after, all is quiet, save for a small coup involving Tyrael absconding from heaven with the Black Soul Stone to prevent its corruptive influences from doing any more damage to the high heaven. But one other angel desires its power also. Malthael, the once Archangel of Wisdom, now Angel of Death, takes the stone from Tyrael and launches a campaign to destroy the population of Sanctuary and the Burning Hells, as he deems the humans of Sanctuary, being part demon, evil. Malthael nearly succeeds if not for the intervention of the same awakened Nephilim, which we, the hero, control. This is even after Malthael absorbs the souls of the 7 evils trapped in the Black Soul Stone, which are released upon his death. It's also during this time that a Crusader and Necromancer join the ranks of the heroes. But who ends up being the canonical hero of Diablo 3 and Reaper of Souls is yet to be revealed. Perhaps we shall see in Diablo 4. This takes us to the upcoming addition to the timeline with Diablo 4. Please forgive the extremely abridged account of events. I want to fit in as much as I could into one timeline recap. The full story is much more nuanced, obviously, and I invite you to view the story in full found in the play section of this channel, which will be fleshed out further when the game comes out. What we do currently know about Diablo 4 is Lilith has returned yet again, released by the machinations of an enigmatic pale summoner known as Elias, and has begun to spread her influences around Sanctuary and the Burning Hells. Inarius, curiously, has also returned, but by whose hand yet is unknown. and we will see in time. And what of the fates of the 7 great evils? We've seen Andariel and Juriel in gameplay teasers, but no hints as to the whereabouts of Diablo, Mephisto, Baal, Belial, and Asmodan, save for Lilith's...
On June 6th of 2023, Diablo 4 officially launched, and it was an instant home run success. Twitch was booming, the concurrent player base peaked at almost 7 million players, long queue times, and celebrities partook in the ride. Everybody thought this was the game they were going to call home for a while. Now, there are as little as 400 people watching Diablo 4 on Twitch, players are forced to complete world bosses and events completely on their own, and player population dropped by over 99%. The economy between Eternal and Seasonal realms have been destroyed by rampant bugs. Season 1 content was an absolute disaster, and Season 2 looks to be the exact same. How did this happen? Where did this once beloved franchise go wrong? And what will it take to fix it? Today I'm going to explore the timeline of Diablo 4 from pre-release to what the game is now. Grab a cup of coffee and settle in, because this is the complete timeline of how Diablo 4 became the biggest disappointment in gaming history. Of course, I want to give a big thank you to the YouTube subscription members who keep this dream alive by directly supporting the channel. We truly couldn't do it without you, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later. Now, ever since the late 90s, Blizzard Entertainment has been a staple in the gaming world, making some of the most popular and beloved gaming franchises of all time. The Warcraft trilogy, StarCraft, Diablo, Hearthstone, Overwatch, and their most popular, the World of Warcraft. The Diablo franchise in particular was a real heavy hitter. It embodied the true heart and soul of what the company stood for at the time. An incredible RPG gaming experience that is a mix of fantasy and dark gothic horror that many people across the world just couldn't put down. Diablo 2 released in the year 2000 and had a profound impact on the gaming world and revolutionized the ARPG genre. The social aspect alone fostered a sense of community among players, paving the way for future online multiplayer games. And if you didn't want to play online, you didn't have to. The game left a permanent mark on the gaming world by introducing multiplayer features, innovative gameplay mechanics, expansion packs, and DLCs that influenced countless titles that followed it. This iconic game remains relevant even 2 decades after its initial release, leaving people hooked to this day. By the time Diablo 3 went into production, a whole new development team was in place, and in many eyes, this time period was the beginning of the end for Blizzard Entertainment. With the game finally launching on May 15th, 2012, the infamous Error 37 plagued the internet, leaving countless players in limbo on launch day.
This is a message to the people who work for Blizzard. Can't even play the fucking game! This is bullshit! This is bullshit! I paid money, cash money, dollar money, cash money!
The auction house, doing more harm than good, gave you the opportunity as a player to spend hundreds of dollars of your hard-earned real-life money on items in the game. And this benefited Blizzard greatly because they took a $1 cut on every successful auction. And with the game's insane levels of progressive difficulty, it meant that if you wanted to progress the game effectively, the perfect gear was just in wallet's reach for nearly 2 years until it was finally removed. It took many years of innovation to bring Diablo 3 to where it is today. DLCs, seasons being implemented, greater rifts, and non-stop updates for nearly 10 years. A game with a disastrous launch and some fundamental problems with its core design has grown into one of Blizzard's most long-lasting and beloved games that is currently being played and viewed as much as Diablo 4. Now, with 3 games in the franchise under its belt, Blizzard was looking to announce Diablo 4 at BlizzCon. But with the horrific Diablo Immortal announcement at BlizzCon 2018,
with Android and iOS, we don't have any plans at the moment to do PC. Do you guys not have phones?
Yeah, you guys all have phones, right?
trying to build excitement for yet another Blizzard game is something that seems very grim in today's world. The once king of kings in game development has fallen very far from what they once were. They're hoping their heavy-hitter franchise like Diablo can once again spark life into the cold, bitter shell Blizzard is today. It all started with a grand announcement at BlizzCon, building hype and excitement amongst the fans. Easily being one of their greatest cinematics to date, the Diablo 4 announcement trailer left fans excited and happy to see Blizzard attempt to return to their truly dark and gothic roots of Diablo 2. Once the announcement trailer dropped, Blizzard was officially on the clock from the fans. And then, disaster struck.
More than 1,500 Activision Blizzard employees are calling for the resignation of the company's CEO, Bobby Kotick.
That Kotick had known about things, and he also had threatened to have an assistant killed at one point.
The company began to truly unravel midway through the development in 2021, with a major lawsuit against Activision Blizzard being filed for a near 2-year running investigation into the company from the state of California. Between the sexual allegations, unfair and unethical treatment toward women in the workplace, and more dark, evil secrets being surfaced, hundreds of employees at Blizzard walk out to protest against this frat boy culture, and even more quit or step down from the company, leaving everything in disarray. And Diablo 4 was no exception to this. The ongoing sexual harassment lawsuit took a major toll on Blizzard, and the company bled high-quality developers and talent rapidly. In Blizzard's earning report for investors, they clearly stated that it has become apparent that some of the Blizzard content planned for the next year will benefit from more development time to reach its full potential. They also said they need extra time to complete production and continue growing their creative resources to support the titles after launch. Though not stated explicitly, the wording in the report implies that neither Overwatch 2 or Diablo 4 will launch before 2023. So with no other option, Diablo 4 was officially delayed. For a while during this time, Blizzard did what they do best: feed and prey off the nostalgia of previous games from their fans. The nostalgia of the great times this company once had. They went down the line and re-released titles of all their beloved games. Classic World of Warcraft, which led to what is now the re-release of the Wrath of the Lich King. Warcraft Reforged, which is a convoluted disaster. And finally, Diablo 2 Resurrected. They knew that by releasing these games, it would make them hundreds of millions of dollars and give them more time to try and develop something new that the fans would come to love once again. But time and time after, they fail to follow through with that promise and always come up short. With the new day and age of Blizzard's monetization, where they squeeze everything they can take, it finally took its toll. Classic era of World of Warcraft having expansion pack passes, character boosts, and now a new WoW token across expansions, where you can literally buy gold with real-life money. Overwatch 2 being a copy of Overwatch 1 with egregious monetization and broken promises of new content and story that never came to light. Warcraft Reforged being a reskin with even more broken promises. At this point in time, it seems as if the company continues to make the wrong decisions based on greed and simply takes advantage of its player base across every game they've ever developed. We had no choice. The only thing we can do now is hope that Diablo 4 doesn't follow this sad and beat down pattern. And for many others, including myself, this would be Blizzard's last chance at repairing what is a betrayed and broken relationship between us and what used to be a magical company.
So stop holding out hope that Blizzard is going to come back. Everyone who founded Blizzard, all the principles that Blizzard was founded on, are dead. They've been desecrated. Let Blizzard go. That's my main message. Is let Blizzard go. Appreciate what was created back when it was done. Stop holding out hope that it's going to be back.
Hope. Hope is all that remains. In August of 2022, Blizzard announced their Diablo 4 alpha playtest, running for friends and family of Blizzard employees. Jason Schreier, a Bloomberg reporter, states on Twitter, "A bunch of people are playing an early build of Diablo 4 right now, thanks to a friends and family alpha test. These players are under NDA, but I'm hearing mostly positive buzz." Schreier also noted that there are no microtransactions in the alpha build, so players won't have much of an idea what to expect from monetization. Although, Blizzard has previously confirmed that small Diablo 4 purchases will be cosmetic only, aside from larger story expansions. Months later, the Diablo 4 endgame beta invites go out in October of 2022, and the playtest officially begins. The playtest itself gave lucky testers a chance to go up against Lilith in the post-campaign Sanctuary and test out Diablo 4's endgame modes and instances. This included the Whispers of the Dead system, the progressively challenging Nightmare dungeons, region-wide Helltides, the Fields of Hatred PvP, and the Paragon board progression system. This was the only endgame test they hosted before launch, with enough time to make changes. And this is going to be important and a big conversation topic later. A couple months after that, a massive article comes out on the Washington Post stating that Diablo 4 developers are working overtime to meet the release deadline, and it also includes their own staff, stating there is mismanagement and disturbing script changes that might contribute to delays. It's a process that's been plagued by mismanagement and employees being promised perks for working late evenings and weekends outside of regular work hours, but employees stating they were simply negligible perks, such as a $25 DoorDash credit if they worked more than 10 hours a day. They described a mounting sense of dissatisfaction and malice amongst employees as they endured leadership change constantly, and that the Diablo team has been losing talent for over a year as employees look for more competitive wages and better work conditions elsewhere. Activision Blizzard CEO Bobby Kotick attributed the company's stock price drop to the game delay of Diablo 4 and Overwatch 2 rather than the ongoing sexual harassment lawsuit filed against the company in July of 2021. He quotes, "I think what affected the stock price more than the sexual harassment investigation is pushing out the release dates of Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4. His comments frustrated some of the company's developers who felt he was blaming them unfairly, stating, "We felt very much like he just drove the bus over on top of us." As you can see, the relationship and chemistry within the company seems to begin crumbling. A person familiar with senior leadership found the performance shares unnecessary and even destructive, arguing that they incentivize leadership to cut corners, compromise, and ship products that are not ready to be released instead of doing what is the best thing for the long-term value creation. Employees state they just went to work every day and got angry, either because the tools were slow or they simply did not like the game that much. They also stated that it wasn't just employees that left. It was many with institutional knowledge and decades of experience, leaving brand new employees and developers brought in from elsewhere to fill in. Diablo 4's unannounced internal release date went from 2021 to December of 2022, then got pushed back further to April 2023, and then finally June of 2023. A former employee stated, "We're at the point where they're not willing to delay the game anymore. So we all just have to go along and figure out how much we're willing to hurt ourselves to make sure the game gets released in a good enough state." To help Diablo 4 get over the finish line, Activision Blizzard enlisted industry veterans such as Rod Ferguson. Rod would hold weekly Zoom meetings known as Rodcasts, which during them he would talk about celebrities he's met and movies he enjoys. Employees felt that not much actually came out of these discussions, stating, "To me, he came off as a bit of a clout chaser about where he came from, like Gears of War. We all thought he was going to come in and fix the game. And when nothing happened, that's when you started to see this massive turnover." The Blizzard Entertainment company that was once so dedicated to quality and putting out the best product they possibly can is currently rushing out Diablo 4 in a good enough state, with employees and team members who don't get along, and leaders who are poor at taking care of their team members. All of this inside of an environment that is polluted with greed and numbers more than anything. With launch just a few months away, Diablo 4 is looking grim. On February 21st, the developers officially released the Inside the World of Sanctuary video, where they've had many developers speak upon the art direction, environment, monsters, gameplay innovations, and world building. They made promises and stated they wanted to bring the game back toward Diablo 2.
We wanted to bring Diablo 4 artistically more back towards like Diablo 2, the much darker style.
And they also emphasized non-repetitive gameplay features.
So you never feel like you're always doing the same thing. The pacing is always a little bit different.
On March 1st, they released a video showing the gameplay trailer for the beta early access of Diablo 4, announcing that you could play the game on March 17th through March 19th if you pre-purchase the $90 Digital Deluxe or $100 Ultimate Edition of the game. The $100 Ultimate Edition gives you the advantage to play up to 4 days early over everyone else, the accelerated seasonal battle pass unlock, mounts, cosmetics, emotes, and even rewards for their other Blizzard games such as World of Warcraft, Diablo Immortal, and Diablo 3. By this point, it is very well known that Diablo 4 was going to have a battle pass that was cosmetic only, and a big reward for buying this set of editions was a small boost through the battle pass. It's important to note that the battle pass was not available until the launch of Season 1, which didn't come until a month and a half after the game's launch. The early access weekend for Diablo 4 arrived, and the game was in the hands of the public, allowing you to go up to level 25. This weekend was only available to players who have pre-ordered the Digital Deluxe Edition, and you can play as the Barbarian, Rogue, or Sorcerer. It only allows you to play through Diablo 4's prologue in one zone, and that is Fractured Peaks. Once again, no endgame testing. At first, the servers were plagued with horrendous queue times and error codes. A simple explanation is that there is a repeating cycle going on where players would sit in a sometimes over hour-long queue, finally get logged into the game, to only then get disconnected and be put back in an even longer queue after about 5 to 10 minutes of playing. This continued through most of the night until Blizzard put out a patch that seemingly fixed the problem. This angered many people because they spent additional money to play that said early access weekend, and it started to raise some eyebrows in the community. Overall, though, from a gameplay perspective, people were relatively happy with Diablo 4 as a game so far. But of course, there were concerns, and there were a few in particular that stood out to the community. And like a dagger coated in poison, issues that seemingly never went away. Some of these include that there isn't anything in Diablo 4 that's redefining what an ARPG can be. Tedious grinds that you're forced to do and aren't even fun the first time, including Renown, Altars of Lilith, Waypoints, and instead of it being fun challenges, it was simply a Google search to find the location and run around and collect them all. The UI across the board needed work, being forced to play online and having no offline mode worried player bases about server stability, and it felt like Diablo 4 wasn't created with the same heart as Diablo 1 and 2 were. Little did they know, it only got much worse moving forward. The open beta weekend arrived, allowing everybody openly to play the game, and all 5 classes up to level 25. Immediately, players are noticing the difference in power between the Druid and the Necromancer, and coming to the conclusion that classes like the Barbarian and the Druid lag behind significantly in terms of kill speed, unlike the other classes leveling. The balance was so bad about the Druid that memes were being made, and the class was nothing but a laughingstock.
For 17 damage.
Oh, what a... Players feel as though that the game is missing key features such as the gem tab, skill loadouts, more bank storage, inventory filters, and more quality of life features that are widely seen across gaming. Between the issues with the early access and open beta weekends, players are starting to believe that the game is poorly developed and there is a lot of fine-tuning that needs to be done. Other than that, the base game of combat animations and story seemed good enough for now. After the open beta weekends, the official Diablo team releases the Into the Endgame developer update video, breaking down everything the game has to offer once you reach the end game. And developers made incredibly bold promises that were sadly never delivered upon.
Brand new activities that provide meaningful progression, no matter their playstyle.
There's going to never be an absence of something to do.
Paragon Horror's Place will allow you to have a lot more depth, a lot more customization, many more options as you go. There's over 120 dungeons to play through and find in Diablo 4, and any one of them can become a nightmare dungeon.
We later found out that this was simply not true, being that there was only roughly 20 nightmare dungeons in a rotation at a time, forcing you to do the same ones over and over again. A few days later, the Diablo 4 team announces they are making significant changes to character classes, dungeon design, UI changes, and more. This leaves people very excited that the developers are listening to player feedback and are excited for the future. Through the last few months before launch, the Diablo 4 developers assure us that they're going back to their roots of Diablo 2.
Well, the initial direction was Diablo 2.
The fantasy of a dark, gothic medieval world.
Darker and grittier, and Diablo 2 is kind of the inspiration.
We wanted to bring Diablo 4 artistically more back towards like Diablo 2.
Have we heard this story before? Is this something that Blizzard is doing once again to tug on our nostalgia? Is history going to repeat itself like it did with Warcraft Reforged, Overwatch, and World of Warcraft Classic? The only thing left to do now is hope what they say is true, and await launch day. Before you know it, the internet is absolutely slammed with Diablo 4 marketing. Whether it be the KFC collaboration, the non-stop Megan Fox promotions, pre-launch dinner parties with big names in the gaming industry, the Diablo 4 cathedral painting in France, the Halsey Diablo 4 song, and even a launch live-action trailer. They also announced the Diablo 4 hardcore leveling competition, where the first 1,000 users to reach level 100 on hardcore will be eligible to have their battle tag engraved on a physical statue of Lilith on the Blizzard campus. Blizzard held nothing back in wanting all eyes of the world on Diablo 4, and they knew this launch was going to be a big deal for them. It was either going to make or break the company moving forward, and they were ready to show the world what they had in Diablo 4. At least, that's what we thought. On June 1st of 2023, the early access launch of Diablo 4 finally arrived. It doesn't matter too much how amazing a game is or even how well received it is. Shareholders, executives, and accountants want to know how well a game is selling. They revealed that in just 5 days, sales of Diablo 4 had surpassed $666 million in revenue, estimating nearly 10 million game copies sold, not even including the additional microtransactions so heavily apparent inside the game. In corporate eyes, Diablo 4 was booming, and it was nothing short of a monumental success. It became officially Blizzard's fastest-selling game of all time. So, Activision Blizzard was back on top, right? Well, that statement couldn't have been more untrue. Shortly after launch, the internet was flooded with reviews about Diablo 4. The early game, being relatively good from a gameplay perspective, quickly dissipated as people headed into the end game. Because the truth is, Diablo 4 had no innovation and nothing truly creative toward the ARPG genre, and Blizzard simply took no risks. Tree of Whispers are the same thing as bounties from Diablo 3. They kept the same generic gambling systems. Paragon boards are just stolen content from Path of Exile and Wolken. Nightmare dungeons are just rips from Diablo 3. The new free choice leveling is the same thing as Diablo 3's adventure mode. Nothing here was brand new or innovative. It was the same reused and recycled content, and fans were simply bored of it within a few weeks' time. The most common mistake we see from games with lack of endgame presence is they make the grind to max level longer, so it gives them time to come up with something new. And what did Blizzard do? Exactly just that. One by one, they were going across the board and nerfing dungeon farms to permit anyone from leveling too quickly from specific dungeons. And when that wasn't enough, they completely nerfed elite mob density across the board. One of the most fun aspects of the game. Instead of buffing the lackluster dungeons that were boring and slow, they nerfed the fun ones. They continued to do this with nearly everything in the game moving forward. Build diversity was the same result. Across all classes, you could see a clear-cut pattern in people using the same exact builds over and over again. Instead of buffing weak abilities to bring them in line with the strong ones, they simply nerfed the abilities that were performing too well, making everything feel boring. And with the price of recost and the non-existence of skill loadouts or a dual specialization system in play, it was too risky to constantly be testing out and theory crafting new builds. It was too tedious to respec hundreds of Paragon points manually one by one, and flat out too expensive. Having to grind out countless legendary aspects, uniques, and perfect affix rolls on every piece of gear was something that took too much time. By this time, players were reaching level 65 plus, and the level pacing drastically slowed down, and so did the excitement of good loot rewards as well.
So the problem with Diablo 4 is that after you spend about 80 hours into the game, all of the gear upgrades that you can get are so minimal, there's nothing else to do.
So the time it took to level vastly increased, and the rewards and purpose for leveling became so much smaller. It's very obvious to everybody now that Diablo 4 has no endgame, and it was heavily front-loaded. The minor endgame testing, mixed with the constant changing of development teams and major lack of inexperience in workplace professionalism, was finally starting to take its toll. During this time, the in-game cash shop is being flooded with skins and cosmetic options available for purchase, even some cases where the cosmetic armor bought with real money would be bugged and not even appear on your character. The hardcore player-based drama is at an all-time high, with players dying constantly to server instability, disconnects, and things being completely out of their control through bugs and poor optimization of the game. Even worse, to confirm your place as a winner in the race, you had to tweet the Diablo Twitter account a Diablo 4 hashtag, your full battle net and battle tag, and lastly, a picture proving you reached level 100. The amateur middle school system of confirming a challenge so important that hundreds of thousands of people are participating in ends up being a massive mistake, and they make errors announcing the wrong winners. This showed a major lack of effort and care in a multi-billion-dollar company, and once again, amateur or brand new developers making huge mistakes, skating by and doing things just good enough once again. There were even several websites out there that track the progress of the hardcore characters with having zero budget, so surely Blizzard could have done it themselves. It became too difficult to manage storage inside of a full loot ARPG game. The Between gems, legendaries, and aspects, rare items, uniques, inventory was quickly flooded within minutes of grinding out a single dungeon, and players demanded more room for their other characters. When Blizzard finally responded over a month later, they stated they couldn't add more because it creates a lot of memory overhead. When you see another player in game, you load them and their entire stash filled with all of their items. Things like a gem tab, leaderboard, stash tabs, loot filters, ability loadouts, all announced to be added in future expansions, sometimes as far as 6 months to a year from now. 1 month after the game launches, they hosted a developer live stream bringing us all some crucial updates to try and calm the community down. To kick off the show, they gave us a 30-minute segment on their new Diablo Immortal class, the Blood Knight, and the whole lore behind the mobile game right now. They also finally showed off the Battle Pass monetization and the seasonal blessings that are implemented to help us quickly gain crafting materials, gold, and experience points more efficiently. This is in regard to having us create whole new characters inside of seasonal realms. And believe it or not, those completely backfired as well. When you spent Smoldering Ash to increase the amount of gold or materials that you would gain, there was a bug that would increase the amount of costs of everything as well by the same exact percentages. So it became nothing but an illusion of choice. And to even acquire all of your Smoldering Ash, you actually had to obtain max level to acquire them all, leaving you a system that is nothing but broken and contradictory. Only half of your renown carried over, and half of the brand new content and class changes in Season 1 was locked to the seasonal realms and was forbidden on the Eternal realms. Meaning that if you wanted all of these brand new changes and updates, you had to start all over and create a whole new character. You were then forced to go onto seasonal realms, and players were quickly flooded with additional monetization. They even coincidentally made the paid accelerated battle pass button the largest icon and glow red on the homepage. They also coincidentally didn't add a confirmation button so that if you accidentally clicked it, you spent your money without any warning. Bugs even went rampant through Season 1, with people having the ability to trade hundreds of millions of gold, legendaries, and even unique items between the Eternal and Seasonal realms, completely destroying hard-earned player progression. By this point, players were at their limit. Metacritic scores plummeted, and the population slowly dwindled down to nothing within a week of Season 1 being launched. And with the final nail in the coffin, Larian Studios released Baldur's Gate 3 on August 3rd of 2023. Easily being the front runner for the game of the year, it knocked Diablo 4 out. The game had longer replayability, no egregious monetization, good developers, better RPG aspects, innovative design with stable servers and a real character creator, and gameplay sections with freedom of choice throughout your entire playthrough. Most of the
crazy thing about this, guys, is she may have left for the money, but you need to understand NCSoft is directly competing with BDO. They picked JJ because she knows the inner workings of the company and how they can be exploited, how they can be beat, okay? And in this case, all she's got to do, guys, is be like, yeah, they don't listen to their Western audience at all. It dramatically influences the player base, and people get really upset about it. Okay, well, we'll just do that. That's all the conversation has to be had. That's it, right? It's like, hey, what problems does Pluribus have? Well, they kind of just turn their ears off when Europe talks or when North America talks. Okay, well, we won't do that, especially if they're literally responsible for 60% of our income. All right, so this is the NA CEO designs and moves to Throne and Liberty.
Hello, today we're going to go over the Pluribus CEO for North America, and they are resigning. Well, they have already resigned from Pluribus, and they plan to go ahead and take the helm of NCSoft's The Throne and Liberty, which is not something.
Is this Squidius? I'm fairly certain this is Squidius. I don't know. They refer to people as Squidius. I'm not very familiar with the console community, right? His name is Sword Kings on YouTube. That's how I know him. That's how I know him. I know him as Sword King. And I watch his shit because his shit is really good.
Something that I thought was going to happen, but here we are. This is originally where the information came from. Guido had sent this to me in a DM, and I was completely confused. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, guys, if you don't know, the CEO of Pluribus America, JJ, someone I've met many times. I feel like I have a pretty good standing relationship with JJ. She's fantastic. I made a video about it. Yes, she left Pluribus America. Understand, remember the NA CMGM team that you guys love so much? It's super good. She built it. Okay, she was the first employee for North America. Okay, for Pluribus. Right? And she left. And she went to the direct competitor. She went to NCSoft for the release of Throne and Liberty to be their new North American CEO. NCSoft definitely offered her more money. It is a far, far bigger company. No question. I guarantee you. However, I think it's just a W move for NCSoft. I'll be honest. JJ was a large part of the reason that, like, the North American CMGM team is awesome. I don't have any complaints. But again, she was the leader of that team. If she does the same thing, but for TNL, it will be a huge boon for the company, right? Imagine her putting together like a CMGM team that like interacts with the players in Throne and Liberty. People love that shit. That's what keeps us at bay from constantly cussing Pluribus out, from constantly just literally rioting in the streets. Is the CMGM team like crazy that she would go to the direct competitor though? Actually, just nuts.
Didn't expect that, so I'll on over here and peep the article and then give my thoughts and opinions and then just sort of kind of end it off there. So as we can see, former Pluribus America CEO takes the helm of NCSoft America. Last week we reported on Pluribus American CEO Jonathan JJ Jin announcing the end of her tenure after 6 years for a new career challenge. We know just where she ended up, right at the top.
I love it. A new career challenge. Yep. It's the exact same position with more money. Very challenging.
NCSoft America. That already is crazy in itself, to be honest with you. But continue reading. Jin will now be the CEO of the American branch of the publisher and developer and will spearhead any effort by NCSoft to enhance its global competitiveness and accelerate the regional expansion strategy by leveraging CEO Jin's deep understanding and extensive experience and strong network in the Western game market.
She does have a really strong network in the Western game market. And to be clear, I love this. I love this. Okay? As a content creator, as Blue Squadron, as someone that has met JJ and shook her hand, okay? I know I have a good standing relationship with JJ. Okay? And now she's working for the next MMO that I'm gonna go play. This is a win. This is an objective. God, who are we gonna sponsor? Hey, how you doing? You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that's gonna happen, but it is an objective win.
About that is JJ is a very passionate person. I met her at the Calpheon Ball, and she was actually the one that was the most communicative.
Dude, JJ, whenever JJ used to talk to me, I said this in the other video too. She always did genuinely seem concerned when I brought her issues. She would be like, what do you think that the community is struggling with right now? And I would be like, this, and this. Oh my God, okay, so what are they struggling with? It's like, I understand that nothing came of that, but it is important to me that like she felt sincere about being like, okay, yeah, you're having a problem. Okay, let's listen to that problem. She's being an excellent therapist, if I'm being honest. Like, I felt better about the game literally not changing at all, having expressed that to her. Nothing's gonna happen, but like, I felt better, you know what I mean? Like, she's good at her job.
For pretty much all the partners for the NA side of things. If you guys are familiar, Leo Storm, aka J-Ray, he used to be a partner and he came to the Calpheon Ball.
Yeah, and so the question on everyone's mind is exactly what was just asked in chat. She may have left for her frustrations of her hands being tied in matters like that. Yeah, because like the West would complain, right? And for those of you that don't know, anyone that's not Korea is considered the West, but in this case I'm referring to North America. North America would complain, that feedback would get pushed through, and nothing would happen. They just don't want to listen, right? So like, she could have left, we don't know. She could have left because of that frustration. Going to the direct competitor certainly is a statement, right? She obviously tried to leave on as good a terms as possible, but that's definitely a statement to be making, you know? Like,
dude, he actually had a...
And if that is the reason, that I'll take it a step further. If that's the reason she did leave, was that exact frustration, that would imply that in Throne and Liberty, it's different. But they promised her that it would be different, right? Let's be honest, it was probably the money, but we can dream.
One-on-one meeting with her, and it was actually really positive. He got a lot of information, and she was very vocal and upfront and honest about the, you know, situation with console. She knew it was tough for us. She knew it was...
Bro, she's a businesswoman. I give her massive props for even making this decision. I give her, bro, that woman is standing on business, bro. What a unit. That is the kind of female leader that I like to see. You know what I mean? What a legend.
Big issue, and honestly, her hands were tied by a myriad of other things, which is, again, it just goes back to Korea realistically on the reasons why things...
Video gonna be better now that she's gone. I can't imagine it's gonna get any better or worse, in my opinion. Based on how much power the North American office actually has to influence change on the Korean office of Black Desert Online, it really wouldn't matter if they put the Pope in charge. They're not gonna listen to him. They don't care. All JJ could do was try to stem the bleeding. And I think she did a pretty good job.
To the way that they are, which sucks, but I think that also probably
She's kind of hot too, bro. You need Jesus.
To her being the reason why she left the company. I can't really, you know, for sure say or speak on it, but just from the conversation that J-Ray had, where she was basically saying, yeah, console had to be put on the back burner of the operations of all of 2023 or 2022. I forgot what year she said or what the time frame was, but it was a while ago. And yeah, she just openly admitted to Leostorm that literally console was on the back burner. Like, she just straight up said that, which some people might be mad that she said that, but you got...
Some people might be mad. The console Discord almost burned to the ground when she said that. I remember when she said, yeah, so console's kind of on the back burner. Really what she meant was we're waiting on Sony because they're losers, okay? But she can't say that, all right? But like, Pearl Abyss has had these changes ready for console for years. And like Xbox, Microsoft, not a problem. Sony, literal degenerate losers. Okay? Can't push anything through Sony. So she said, yeah, console's kind of on the back burner until, you know, basically she's implying that Sony, you know, we're waiting for Sony to approve stuff. And the community went apeshit.
You gotta think about it from the perspective of that she was willing to say that. She was willing to be honest and communicative to just a partner. And at the time, I don't actually think J-Ray was a partner at the time. I think he was a +1 to one of the other partners, but I could be wrong about that, so don't quote me there. But just the idea of her being that honest and upfront was really, really cool. And
she was super honest with me every time I would ask her a question. And guys, believe me, I asked her some hard questions. She just gave it to me straight, bro.
I honestly appreciated that more than anything else. And the fact that she is basically the one that gave us all of the NA events. If you guys didn't know, each region has their own, like, branch leader, for example.
I don't know if I would give her that much credit. She obviously had a hand in making a lot of events, but I would not count out, I'm not exactly how sure the inner workings of the company, but I absolutely know that the CMGM team and the team leads come up with event ideas as well. It's not all JJ making all of the events. That's not what's happening. But like, I'm sure she definitely had a hand.
So North America's events are strictly for North America, and the EU events are strictly for EU, and so on and so forth for every other region, right? So North America essentially was the most spoiled region when it came to events. We genuinely got a lot of really dope events. And even for console too, it was really, really good. And she was...
I would not say that we are more spoiled than the other regions. I think that that's a little bit out of touch. I think that unless you were literally directly... See, I compare what we get to the other regions every week Because see, I know what every single region is basically getting every week because I'm dialed in to every one of the PCCs. He's on console, which in fairness, it might be different for console. But I'm gonna tell you right now, the reason North America is spoiled is because the CMGM team actually interacts with its streamers, actually interacts with its community by giving us buffs and stuff, and actually does a lot of like GM events. I think probably more than the other region. But spoiled in that regard. But in terms of like overall like game events, I don't know about that one.
Is the reason behind that. And now that she's
like, we don't have a best in class tournament right now, but Asia does. Oh, we're celebrating the 2-year anniversary of the merge. You, bro. You can't give one region. You can't give one region the best in class tournament, and then all the other regions are like, what the hell? Like, we all want it too. We've been waiting for it for 5 years.
No longer here, it could be potentially a big issue that like we get somebody else that is not as.
What about Onlay and the other GMs get posted to NCSoft? Onlay is an EU GM. It's very, or CM. It's very important that you understand that. NA and EU are different. You're talking about Corruption, Etsu, Poly, and the rest of the Whomega lols that work in the office. I'm just kidding, guys. I love all of you. I'm just totally joking. CM, Dennis, everybody. I love you guys. You guys are fantastic. But like, she could very well poach some of the team members with her, right? She would have to offer more money, which I'll be honest with you, is really easy to do. We're talking about NCSoft. How much is NCSoft worth right now? $2.74 billion. We gave it. We barely meet that in Korean won, guys. We're not even. What is this in real dollars? Where is this in real dollars? God damn it. Why would you give it to me in Korean won? Okay, Pearlibus, 2 billion. Market cap, 2 billion. Okay, but NCSoft is backed by BlackRock, isn't it? Is it NCSoft is absolutely backed by BlackRock? I'm pretty sure. NC West, Tencent, yeah, which is BlackRock. They're backed by Tencent. Yeah, like they have way more money. They have way more money. For Asia,